You get the call. MSHA inspectors arriving in 7 days. Your stomach drops because you know exactly what's sitting in those cabinets and what's not. Most safety managers panic when MSHA calls and immediately start creating documents that should have existed months ago. But the last thing that you want an inspector to discover are brand new training records with yesterday's date sitting next to 3-year-old workplace examination forms. A few years ago, a quarry owner called me on a Tuesday afternoon. MSHA was coming the following Monday, and you could hear the panic in his voice. He wanted to rewrite every safety program over the weekend and backdate everything and the training signatures and I told him stop. The goal wasn't manufacturing compliance. The goal was to honestly evaluate where he stood so we could fix the real gaps and organize the legitimate proof that he'd already had. When we opened those file cabinets, the truth was fixable. His workplace examinations existed, but they weren't signed consistently. Annual refresher training was overdue for 3 employees. His Part 46 plan hadn't been updated when he had added new equipment. Those are correctable problems. Creating fake documents to cover them up would have been a career-ending disaster. The truth living in your file cabinets is going to do one of two things. It's going to defend you or it's going to destroy you. An inspector can spot fabricated documents in seconds. Different handwriting, records that are suspiciously perfect with no corrections, training dates that don't line up with the hire dates or equipment purchases. The real danger isn't what you're missing, it's trying to hide what you're missing by creating false proof. That move transforms a minor citation into a willful violation, and willful violations carry penalties 10 times higher than the original gap would have ever cost you. Think about the damage to your PR when everybody knows you're trying to hide. You can't recover from that. Days 1 and 2 are about reality, not panic. Pull every training record, every workplace examination form, every written program, every equipment inspection log, every previous citation and abatement. Organize what exists, identify what's missing, then document the gaps honestly on a single sheet of paper, title it Compliance Gap Assessment with the date on it. That sheet becomes your roadmap to the next 5 days, and if anyone questions you later, it proves you have identified deficiencies and you started correcting them the moment you found them. That's due diligence on paper. So the file cabinet sweep tells you where you actually stand, but knowing your training is overdue doesn't fix it. And most operators believe that there's no defensible way to close that gap in 48 hours. That belief is exactly what gets people sued. There's a fast path that protects you and a fast path that becomes the evidence against you in a deposition. Most companies believe that they can't get legitimate MSHA training done in 48 hours, so they panic buy online certificates that won't hold up under scrutiny. But there's a massive difference between a $29 computer module that spit out on a PDF and instruction delivered by an MSHA recognized trainer operating under an approved MSHA training plan. Picture the moment an attorney places that generic computer-based certificate on a conference table during a deposition. Someone got hurt. Your training documentation is now evidence. The attorney looks at you and asks, how do you know this employee understood the material? Who verified competency? Can you name the instructor? What site-specific hazards were covered? If all you have is a 45-minute computer module, you have no answer. That's why we deliver Part 46 and Part 48 training through MSHA-recognized instructors operating under approved training plans. That training is defensible. The documentation shows instruction occurred under an established program, questions were answered, discussions happened, and competency was evaluated. That's what holds up when the water gets hot. The gap that most companies miss is that MSHA training requirements were never about producing certificates. They're about proving workers received meaningful instruction connected to the actual hazards they are facing. Generic training fails that test. When inspectors review your records, they aren't just checking dates and signatures, they're evaluating whether the training plan reflects your current operation, whether the instructors are qualified, whether the content matches your equipment and your hazards, and whether the documentation proves understanding actually happened. Days 3 and 4 are for closing your urgent training gaps, but only with defensible instruction. If annual refreshers are overdue, get them scheduled immediately with a qualified provider. If you added new equipment and operators were never trained on it, document the gap and schedule task-specific training. If your Part 46 plan hasn't been updated, get it revised to reflect your operation as it exists today, not how it existed 5 years ago. The 48-hour window isn't about shortcuts. It's about prioritizing the highest risk gaps and fixing them with instruction that will actually protect you when someone goes looking. You fix the gaps you can fix. But proof you can't find is proof you don't have, at least in the eyes of the inspector. And right now, your documentation scattered across 3 file cabinets, 5 laptops, and somebody's truck. The way you organize it over the next 24 hours tells the inspector everything about how serious you take this before they review a single record. That same quarry owner spent day 5 building what I call the inspection-ready file. One red binder, clearly labeled, sitting on the desk when the inspector pulls in Monday morning. Section 1 was the master training matrix, listing every employee, their required training, completion dates, refresher requirements, and current status. Section 2 held the workplace examination records, organized by date, signed, with every corrective action documented. Section 3 contained his written safety programs, customized to his operation. Section 4 had the equipment inspection log. Section 5 held previous citations with proof of abatement. Section 6 was management oversight, the safety meeting records, the audit reports, the corrective action tracking. When the inspector requested a document, the owner opened the binder, turned to the tab, and handed it over. No scrambling, no excuses, no searching. The inspector noticed immediately. Organization sends a message that most companies underestimate. It tells regulators you know your responsibilities and you've been managing them all year. And this inspection isn't the first time you've thought through about your compliance position. This organization sends the opposite message, even when the records themselves are adequate. And there's a second layer to this. If a serious incident occurs and your documentation becomes evidence, a well-organized system demonstrates due diligence. It proves you've maintained your proof proactively, not the night before the inspector arrived. That difference often decides whether citations stick or get reduced. Day 5 is about building a single source of truth that answers every single question the inspector is going to ask. 6 sections: employee training, documentation, workplace examinations, written programs, equipment inspection records, regulatory correspondence, and prior citations and management oversight. Every section tabbed, every record dated, every signature present. Then, keep a duplicate electronic version on a secured laptop or a flash drive, because records are only valuable if you can find them. And the benchmark is simple. If an inspector asks for a document, you can produce it in 30 seconds. Not 30 minutes, not tomorrow, 30 seconds. That's the standard. Your proof is organized and defensible. But the strongest binder in the world can be undone in a single sentence at the wrong moment. Most companies designate someone to escort the inspector, but never brief them on what to answer directly versus what to leave alone. That's how a well-meaning employee accidentally volunteers information that creates citations the inspector was never going to find on his own. I've walked it in sideways over a single sentence. A well-meaning supervisor said, "Yeah, we finally got that fixed last week," about an issue the inspector hadn't even noticed. That one comment turned a clean inspection into a citation for a deficiency that existed historically and had already been corrected. The escort's job isn't to be defensive or evasive, it's to be professional and factual. Answer direct questions about what exists. Yes, we conducted weekly workplace examinations. The records are in Section 2. Don't speculate about what might be missing. Don't offer explanations before they're requested. Don't point out problems the inspector hasn't found. Here's the psychology at work during every inspection. Silence creates discomfort, and people fill silence with information. Inspectors know this. They'll ask a question, and then they'll wait. The escort gets nervous and starts talking, and it reveals gaps that were never on the inspector's radar. The professional response is a direct answer to a direct question followed by silence. Where are your training records? Oh, there'll be section 1 of the binder on the desk. Then stop talking. Let the inspector review the record. If there's a deficiency, he'll identify it. Your job is not to help them find problems. Day 6 and Day 7 for final verification, escort preparation. Walk the site with your escort. Look at what the inspector is going to see. Identify anything that needs immediate correction. Equipment without inspection tags, missing personal protective equipment, unlabeled hazards, and fix what can be fixed in the final 48 hours. Then brief your escort, answer direct questions factually, don't speculate, don't volunteer deficiencies, and don't fill silence with information. The goal is professionalism, not defensiveness. You're showing them a well-maintained operation. You're not hiding problems. You've done the work. Now the inspector arrives, walks the property, reviews the binder, and leaves. But the inspection itself isn't really the test. What separates the safety manager who survives from the ones who break down happens after the inspector pulls out of the parking lot, and almost nobody talks about that and what it actually cost you. The inspection ends and the inspector leaves. There's two safety managers. The same phone call a week ago, same 7 days to prepare. One drives home that night and sleeps. The other one spends the next month replaying every conversation in his head, worrying about what the inspector found, what citations are coming, and whether his job is about to disappear. The quarry owner called me the evening after his inspection. He told me the biggest benefit wasn't avoiding citations. He got out with only minor recommendations, but the biggest benefit was avoiding 6 days of unnecessary stress. For nearly a week before we started working together, he'd been imagining the worst case scenario, convinced that the inspection was going to be a disaster. Instead, he learned that preparation is far more effective than panic. The prepared safety manager experiences an inspection differently because he already knows where he stands. The systems work, the documentation tells the accurate story, his operation demonstrates reasonable care, the inspection stops being a crisis to survive. It becomes an opportunity to show professional management. The emotional toll of operating without systems is a cost that most companies never calculate. The prepared manager gets to go home at night, he gets to sit at the dinner table, watch his kids play sports, take his spouse to dinner, and focus on the growing business. His mental energy isn't burned up putting out fires because he knows deficiencies are being caught and corrected before they become emergencies. The unprepared manager, on the other hand, lives in a completely different reality. He worries about citations. He worries about how management's going to react. He worries about the insurance implications. He worries about what else got missed. Even when the inspection results are minor, that stress compounds, and that's the cost of winging it. It was never just about surviving one inspection. It's about whether you can build a career without constant fear of the next phone call that can end it. If MSHA calls tomorrow, you have two options: panic and scramble or execute a plan. The 7-day roadmap I just walked you through: honest file cabinet assessment on days 1 and 2, defensible training fixes on day 3 and 4, organized proof on day 5, final verification, and the escort brief on day 6 and 7 transforms the audit from a career-ending crisis into a professional interaction. You're not hiding gaps, you're identifying them, fixing what can be fixed, organizing what exists, and demonstrating that you knew your responsibilities and took them seriously. That's what holds up under scrutiny. That's what protects your job, your reputation, and your legal standing. And if you've realized you don't want to wait for the call to build that system, if you'd rather operate from a position of continuous readiness instead of the 7-day emergency prep, that's exactly what CSM's fractional safety program was built to do. We don't help you survive inspections. We build systems so strong that inspections become opportunities to demonstrate excellence instead of events to fear. And that's a win. If you found this useful, check out my next video on this channel where I break down the 5 documentation gaps MSHA inspectors look for first and how to fix them in 48 hours before they ever see your files.